Hello and welcome to the Action Network Podcast UFC Betting Preview. I'm Sean Zerillo, joined today by Billy Ward to help you break down this weekend's UFC card, giving you some of our best bets, favorite underdogs, top props, and more. If you'd like to tail some of the bets that we discussed today, make sure to find the quick slip link in the podcast and video description or go to actionnetwork.com/betnow. 12-fight card in Seattle. Prelim start at 6 p.m., main card at 9 p.m. The main event, Henry Cejudo, about a plus 320 underdog against Song Yadong, minus 275. Sorry, plus 220 for Henry Cejudo, minus 275 for Song Yadong. Fight about minus 165 to go to a decision, about 62% implied, plus 130 to end inside the distance. Billy and I aligned on the same side of the fight, betting it slightly differently. However, do want to note, though, the age gap differential between these two. Song Yadong, 11 years younger, and when there's at least a decade of age between UFC opponents, the younger fighter has tended to beat the market, winning about 12% more often than betting market expects. 71% win rate versus about average odds of 59%, minus 145 in that range. Song's also the bigger man. Forge is taller, 3-inch reach advantage. Cejudo, a former flyweight, has mentioned potentially going back down to 125 if he wins this fight. Potentially trying to get his hands back on a UFC title in a division that is a little bit weaker, a little bit more shallow. Now, this is a different matchup for Cejudo than the guys he's faced in recent fights. He had very tough wrestling-style matchups, grappling-style fights with Merab Dvalishvili, current champion, with Aljamain Sterling, who, by the numbers, Cejudo out-grappled for portions of that fight. He had more control time. He landed multiple takedowns in that fight. Aljo had takedowns of his own, but Cejudo had 5 minutes of control. Aljo had 4. That fight was a split on the scorecards, but what I do think is the difficulty for Cejudo in terms of winning this fight consistently is the damage optics. Earlier in his career, much more capable of winning a fight with control time. Now, later in his career, less in cardio, not going to be able to shoot takedowns, more than 2 takedowns a round across a 25-minute fight, which is roughly what he's averaged throughout his career. But he's not going to be able to go in there with a Merab-style game plan, shoot 30 takedowns. He's probably not going to be able to control Song for more than half a round at a time. Song is very strong. His get-ups aren't super technical, but he's able to explode back to his feet, use that athleticism. And then on the feet, Song is the much more dangerous and efficient striker. Cejudo does have the ability to damage him, to slow him down with leg kicks, but Song is going to land the more impactful punches in the pocket and have much better damage optics. So I think there is a chance Cejudo could win minutes of the round with top control, and then they return to their feet, and Song steals the fight back or steals the round back with superior damage on the feet. But overall, I do think Cejudo has the type of style to give Song trouble. Song's lesser skill, or his weakest area, is his grappling defense. He's been taken down, held down in the past, and Cejudo's arguably the best wrestler that he's ever faced. I'm just concerned about the age. Song in his physical prime, Cejudo nearing the end of his career in his late 30s. But if there's somebody whose athleticism is going to carry, it's a world-class athlete like Triple C, former Olympic gold medalist in wrestling, 2-time UFC champion in multiple weight divisions. I'm betting Cejudo by decision at plus 390. I made that line closer to plus 325. I'd like plus 350 or better. I don't give him much finishing upside in the fight. I think Song is the favorite because he has much more knockout upside, much more finishing upside, in addition to the damage optics on the feet. Billy, you're just going to take the straight money line stab at plus 225. Tell me what I missed in terms of my breakdown on this matchup.
I don't think you missed anything. I took this one pretty early in the week. I thought the line would come back in a little bit more than it did, before those method of victory props were up. The only thing stylistically I would add is the way that Song likes to get up and escape. He likes to turn his back, go to his turtle, and stand up. He's been training with Team Alpha Male. They all do that. That works really, really well against guys whose grappling foundation is like judo or sambo, because they want to jump on your back and get submissions rather than break you back down. Wrestling is all about breaking someone back down from that position. I mean, that's referee's position. That's how everything but the first round starts in wrestling most of the time. That is a really tough spot or tough way to get back up against a guy like Cejudo, who is going to flatten you back out, make you do it over and over again. So I like that stylistically for Cejudo. But as you touched on, he came back and fought 2 of the toughest grapplers in the UFC, much less in these divisions. The age is mitigated a little bit by coming back up to 135 instead of 125. You're a year or two younger as a bantamweight than you would be as a flyweight. Still don't love that. I actually wish the co-main was 5 rounds and this one was 3 rounds. I'd feel much better about betting on both sides, honestly. But that's not what we have. I am worried about down the stretch. I don't think he gets hurt here. Cejudo, that is. He's been extremely durable. He's got slick boxing. He's hard to touch. But yeah, you're right about the damage optics. This, and there's many of these on this card, it would be a great point spread bet on the underdog, but the line is just so far apart. It's even money at DraftKings, and I'd rather just take a half unit on his money line at plus 225 and take a bigger swing, because we're not getting really a great price on the point spread because the books correctly realize that this should be a close fight.
Yeah, plus 5.5. Can't really do much with that as the underdog. Would much rather lay that with the favorite. And again, Song does have more finishing upside and more damage optics. You know, you look back at how the Aljo fight was scored. A lot of people, it ended up being a split decision, but more people scored at 49-46 for Aljo than had it 48-47 for Cejudo. And in that case, I think I would want to lay the 5.5 with Song as opposed to taking the 5.5 with Cejudo. I think Cejudo by decision, the best way to go about playing it. Maybe even Cejudo in the decision-only market, though. I projected that at plus 180, and that's exactly where DraftKings is, too. Literally to the number, we were on the mark in the decision-only market. So no value there, decision-only, even though I thought that might be a way to consider playing it. Just Cejudo by decision for me. Billy going with Cejudo on the money line. We'll see if it ends up floating up a little bit more. Maybe some Chinese money coming into the market, the offshore markets, or just people betting the age differential as we get closer to fight time. Our fight of the night, several fights on this card that I'm really interested in. We have a rematch here from LFA between Brendan Allen at plus 270 and Anthony Fluffy Hernandez at minus 320. That fight, that first fight occurred in 2017. Allen opened minus 265 for that fight, closed minus 185. Hernandez opened minus 198 for the rematch at DraftKings, minus 260 elsewhere. He's been bet up well over minus 300. Billy and I agree on one aspect in particular of this fight, which is Alexander Hernandez is a great live bet after 5 minutes, after round one. Billy, I'm going to let you take it away, though, because you have a breakdown for this fight on actionnetwork.com. How are you betting it pre-fight while waiting for the Hernandez live bet?
Yeah, pre-fight, I'm coming in with a Brendan Allen ticket. We see Anthony Hernandez get hurt early in what feels like all of his fights. It's not all of his fights, but it's often. And we've also seen Brendan Allen be much better earlier in fights than late. Yep. And what I realized watching tape, he did the same thing 7 or 8 years ago against Fluffy Hernandez that he did against Nasruddin Imavov in his last fight, which is he'll get an early takedown, but get so greedy, for lack of a better term, hunting subs, he doesn't hurt his opponent. And then if he doesn't get the submission, he kind of walks away with nothing to show for it. Maybe you win the round because you kept attacking stuff, but now you're tired. The other guy kind of just sat there defending, and you didn't do any damage. You didn't weaken him for later rounds. I feel like that's pretty likely to happen again here, just because we've seen 7 or 8 years of Brendan Allen doing that. Against guys he can submit, great. Go tap him out, make it quick, get done with it. If you're not going to find that sub and it's going to go longer into the fight, you put yourself in a pretty bad position. I think if we were doing a 1-round grappling match, I think Brendan Allen is actually the better grappler here. I know everybody loves Anthony Hernandez. He's a lot of fun. He's kind of like the Merab of middleweight. He shot 29 takedown attempts in his last fight. You do not see that amongst bigger fighters. But just in terms of like at their peak, we're both fresh. We're only going to do this for a few minutes. I think Brendan Allen's actually better. Might even be the slightly better striker. I just expect him to exhaust himself going for stuff in the first half or so of this fight. So Brendan Allen pre-fight. You could even go Brendan Allen round one and then try to come back live if you wanted to really stretch it out. Took that at plus 270. After the first round, we should be in a spot, though, where you can kind of arbitrage it and make money either way, assuming that line comes back in on Fluffy Hernandez. That's why I don't like the round one, because you can't really set up that payout either way. Guys are fresh at the start of round. Maybe he comes out swinging real hard in round 2 or 3. Don't think that's the likeliest, but it makes that a little bit tighter needle to thread. So I like Brendan Allen pre-fight. I'm totally with you. You're going to give away, and Hernandez late as well, which exactly how I'm seeing it. I just like trying to build that portfolio where I get paid out either way.
Yeah, same game parlay, Hernandez and the over 1.5 rounds at minus 155. I think that's most of his win condition in this fight. Mm-hmm. As you mentioned, he does tend to get hurt pretty frequently early. He's vulnerable to the body. Saw Kevin Holland put him away with body shots very quickly. Allen is vulnerable to the head, but I don't think Fluffy has the punching power to necessarily put Allen down at striking range. So I give Allen the striking advantage. I'd give Allen the early wrestling advantage, but as you said, he is probably the better submission grappler, but he makes so many more mistakes in terms of the grappling. Fluffy, much calmer. You saw the way he defended against Rodolfo Vieira, bided his time until he was able to get on top and submit Vieira. Hernandez is just much more composed, and that doesn't really align with the chaotic fighting style that he's trying to implement. He's, relentlessly attacking your legs and going for one takedown after another. But then once he gets to those grappling positions, he's actually not prone to making mistakes. He's very calm at progressing from one position to the next and prioritizing position over submission, whereas Allen always prioritizes submission over position and ends up losing said position against guys like Fluffy who are able to defend him. So, yes, I agree with you, Billy. I think Allen, like he did in the first fight, probably lands the first takedown and is the first guy to get top position. But I prefer Hernandez in the scrambling, and I prefer Hernandez the longer the fight goes. I think he has better cardio. I think his pressure, his tenacity, all elite. A bit of an awkward fighter to handicap because, if you think about a fight playing out normally at range or two fighters wrestling in a normal fashion or, a normal MMA fight playing out, Fluffy's skills don't really measure up to Allen's or even a lot of guys in the division. But the way he fights, the way he sticks on you, it's almost the, I think of the Chael Sonnen quote, "I can't let you get close." You can't let Fluffy get close because once he initiates the process of getting the hands on you and starting the takedowns, he puts you through the washing machine. I talked about this before the Roman Kopylov fight. Kopylov hurt him early in round one, but the moment Fluffy got his hands on him, the moment he got him in his grasp, the fight was basically over. It's literally like putting guys through a washing machine. It's rinses and repeats, and it's again and again and again until you're exhausted. So Fluffy live after round one, probably going to be the best price on the favorite. I think we get a competitive round one. I think Allen, I'd say, is 50-50 to win round one, if not favored to win round one, maybe even 60-40 Allen. And then I'd probably go 60-40 Hernandez round two, maybe 80-20 or 90-10 round three as this fight progresses. So Hernandez live after round one, same game parlay, Hernandez in the over 1.5. Could even do Hernandez round three or decision at -130. And then Hernandez decision is about +110, +115. I think all fine ways to play the favorite. Likely prefer the same game parlay at -155. Billy, any props you like on this fight aside from the live angle on Hernandez after the pre-fight on Allen?
Yeah, I mean, the prop would be Allen round one, or you could alternatively Hernandez round three or by decision, slightly better price than what you got. That's kind of just a play with the timing, however you want, with however you have available. But yeah, I mean, he has a shot at finishing it in round one, either on the feet. Like, we could see Andre Petroski versus Adolfo Vieira part 2 this weekend with kind of just a kickboxing match. And just like Petroski over Vieira, I think the underdog here is the better striker. Hopefully we'd see a finish and not what we saw last week, which wasn't a great fight, but we both got paid, so I'm happy with it. Only thing I would add, you mentioned Allen making mistakes. It's frustrating because it's not even technical mistakes. It's not like he didn't pass guard appropriately in this way. Like, his jiu-jitsu is borderline perfect. It's like strategic mistakes. Like, it's just not understanding what you should be trying to accomplish. And you look at all of Fluffy's submissions, that front headlock position, he doesn't have to give up anything to set that up, right? He sets it up. If it's not there, move on. You're still in a great spot. Or arm triangle. He's got an arm triangle tap. You can sit in top position, hold that arm triangle. If you get it, great. If not, you can still beat the guy up. Versus Brandon Allen always trying to jump on your back. And if you don't get that and you get dumped over the top, you got to do the whole thing all over again. So that's the thing that's interesting to me. Wouldn't shock me if he even did find that submission in the first round. So if I was going to prop it, it'd probably be Allen round one.
Yeah, Allen round one, you get as high as 16-1. So definitely an interesting poke there. I think his best path to victory here is just to separate and strike. And I know there will be a point in this fight where he's winning striking at distance and Hernandez hasn't pressured, or he hasn't pressured in a minute, and Allen's going to be the one who initiates the grappling, and then Hernandez is going to get on top again. That seems to happen in every Brendan Allen fight where he's winning one aspect of the fight, and then he's like, well, I'm well-rounded, I should change it up and go for the other thing, and then he ends up losing in the other aspect of the fight. So, yeah, Brendan Allen just prone to in-fight mistakes, prone to not taking the path of least resistance or capitalizing in the area where he has the advantage over his opponent. I do think He'll end up making a mistake. Fluffy will capitalize, and Fluffy will take over down the stretch. Let's moving on to our favorite underdogs on this card. Quite a number of underdogs we like. Just give out one, obviously, in the co-main event. Billy did with Brendan Allen. I've got one of my best bets. Billy kind of has one in his best bets. He's betting an underdog, but doing it in a different fashion. And I've got three highlighted under our favorite underdog section. Billy's also betting one of these in the prop market as well. So quite a bit of agreement on some of these dogs. I'm going to start and throw to you, Billy, first on one that was in your luck rankings earlier this week. Rafael Cerqueira at plus 265 is what you got on Monday. I took plus 230 last night. What's your price target on Cerqueira, and why are you betting this matchup?
Yeah, I think I'd take it down to about plus 200. It's a tricky one. We don't know a ton about Cerqueira. He got starched by Ibo Aslan in his debut. It was a weird situation, though. He was supposed to fight on the Contender Series. They had, at different points, 3 different opponents for him on the Contender Series before he got called up. So, like, I'm going to give him a pass on that just because he was preparing for all kinds of different people. Who knows? Prior to that, 10-0, I think 9 finishes, most of them in the first round. And Bukauskas, who he's fighting, is a guy who can kind of get overwhelmed by, like, big pressure athletes. You know, Jimmy Crute knocked him out in the first round. Khalil Roundtree knocked him out in the second round. Petrino got him in the second round. In an extended fight, I think Bukauskas might be the more skilled fighter. From what I've seen from Cerqueira, though, he's just going to swarm early, do some damage. I think if I was betting it now, that's why I had a hard time with your question, I might take inside the distance or parlayed with under 2 rounds or under 1.5, some version of that, had I not got the better line. But there's just enough unknowns about how this is going to go that getting, if we're flipping a coin because we don't know what's going on, better than 2-1 on one side obviously makes a lot more sense than the other.
Yeah, I think that KO 1 loss, first loss of his UFC career, first, UFC moment he had, is giving us value on potentially 2 fights on this card, both the Cerqueira fight against Bukauskas and then also the Ibo Aslan fight, which we'll discuss later. Cerqueira closed minus 120 against Ibo Aslan after opening at plus 150. So the market moved him to favorite, and then he died on the first exchange. And I do think first exchange KOs, first round KOs, are not very repeatable outcomes. They're random, they're high variance. I think people take away much more from them than they actually tell you. And in the case of a fighter like Ibo Aslan, who we'll get to later, or Nikolai Vretnikov, who we'll get to later, there are guys who fall into this round 1 finisher archetype who, as their fights extend, you don't really know what they have to offer. And Cerqueira actually fits into that category as well. But I think that unpredictability at plus 230 is worth betting into. Not betting into it at minus 120, knowing that Bukauskas is likely the better point fighter, likely to sustain better across a 15-minute fight. But Cerqueira is probably the more dangerous guy. We know Bukauskas has a potentially compromised chin, has been put away in the past, seemingly gets hurt in every fight. So Cerqueira pre-fight, you may be able to come back live on Bukauskas. The other way I was thinking about betting this, though, was the goes to decision at 2-1. I think if Bukauskas wins this, he probably wins by decision. I wouldn't necessarily mind having Cerqueira at plus 230 on the money line and then having a 2-1 bet on the fight to reach a decision and then hopefully cashing either of those tickets. May not even stake them the same, may put a slightly smaller bet on the GTD prop as opposed to the Cerqueira money line. But do you think there's potentially value on Cerqueira based on where he was lying in his last fight, getting what I view as an equal or lesser opponent this time out, more time to prepare, and a significant market adjustment relative to where he was previously? The one dog we do not have necessarily an alignment on, though I'm curious what Billy thinks about this fight. Eric McConaughey at about plus 240. I grabbed him last night versus Nursultan Ruziboyev. I talked about guys with that round 1 finisher archetype. Ruziboyev absolutely fits into that category. He's very big. McConaughey, though, his last fight came at light heavyweight. He won that. He is more of a natural middleweight. He is the smaller man, but I do think he's capable of handling Ruziboyev's power, and I give him the grappling upside and the durability, or the cardio advantage down the stretch of this fight. I want 2-1 or better on Eric McConaughey. I also like him by decision at plus 650, and I think live after round 1 could be a solid entry point as well. McConaughey making his USA debut, but MMA lab trained. Those guys always come in with a very high floor. Not all of them necessarily championship caliber, but basically all of them that we see come into the UFC are very, very well-rounded fighters with decent skill sets who end up sticking around for at least a few fights. Billy, before I move on to the third dog, any thoughts on the Mechanico Ruzaboyev fight?
Yeah, I haven't watched a ton of tape on that. It's hard to find anything on Mechanico, which is kind of why I've mostly stayed away from this one. Don't love a 34-year-old UFC debutant, even though we're both betting on a different 34-year-old UFC debutant on this card. The only pushback I'd give you is I'm not sure that Mechanico has the grappling edge, at least without seeing him. Ruzaboyev trains with Petrosky and Pat Sabatini and Jeremiah Wells and all those guys in Philly. And a lot of his wins before the UFC were submissions. He just came in here and knocked people out. So I think we might have a little bit of a skewed. Mechanico might be the better grappler. Just without actually seeing him do it, I don't feel confident in that assertion. Makes total sense, though. I mean, Ruzaboyev, if he gets extended, historically not been great. Maybe that'll be better for him at middleweight. He's certainly big enough to fight middleweight, so maybe less of a weight cut helps. I don't know. Not a lot of strong thoughts. Just I like to watch a lot of tape. I have a hard time betting on a guy whose fights seem to have existed only in his mind or in the minds of people that saw him that time. Like, I don't know how we didn't record this stuff, but there we are.
Yeah, he's an internet fighter. I guess that's what we could call him. He's a Tapology fighter because his fights only exist within the universe of Tapology or SureDogs databases. Did have a win on Tough Enough last time out. He was supposed to be the main event, I believe, for Tough Enough again this weekend, and the UFC called him up for this Ruzaboyev fight, but Ruzaboyev wasn't booked against anybody. This fight seemingly just made out of thin air. I'm not really sure where it came from. But moving on to our third underdog, Julius Walker against Alonzo Menafield. Walker, a former college basketball player, not necessarily the best base for MMA, but he is 12 years younger here. He's the bigger athlete, 4-inch taller, 2-inch reach advantage. And Menafield is coming off of consecutive knockout losses. He's old. He's in his late 30s. He's slowing athletically, and he hasn't KO'd an opponent himself in over 3 years. Walker does have the grappling upside. He's more of a jiu-jitsu guy. I think if he gets on top, he could finish this fight via submission. He could finish it with ground and pound from top position. But on the feet, I do think he's going to be vulnerable, especially early. Again, Menafield, another guy who fits in that round one finisher category. But then after round one, Menafield typically finds himself fading, struggling to maintain that striking output across a 15-minute fight, struggling to get guys back down to the ground later on in fights. Does have a judo background, decent takedowns, but I think defensively, as he gets tired, Walker is going to wash Menafield in the grappling, like plus 200 or better pre-fight, and then live after round one. Billy, you're going to go ahead and take Walker inside the distance at plus 275. Very close to being a bet for me. May end up on my round robin tickets. Why do you like this one?
I mean, he's finished every fight he's been in 6.5 minutes or less. Only once seen a second round. And it's not even just that. It's that, like you pointed out with Menafield getting knocked out in the first round, his last couple fights, if somebody is knocked out within a minute, it's probably Alonzo Menafield. That's just likelier to happen. The way I see Menafield winning here is just kind of tackling him, holding him up against the fence, making it a slow, boring fight. And if we see that kind of fight, I don't think Julius Walker wins it. This is a big step up for him. I will note he fought a Ultimate Fighter veteran in his last fight, finished it in under 2 minutes. And then before that, fought a UFC veteran, although Bevan Lewis is 7-5 and went like 1-4 in the UFC. So that almost counts. So he's got a pretty tough resume, all things considered, on his way into the UFC. I just don't know what's going to happen to him if he hits a guy and they don't die. You know, like for a lot of times when you're fighting these people who you're just athletically way better than, you put them away, you go home, you cash your check, everyone's happy. And the next thing you know, you're in a fight against a guy who's still there without a lot of experience being in those situations. So I wish the price was farther away from his money line because it almost makes it feel not worth it. I just don't see a decision coming from Julius Walker here. Other thing I will note, Menafield, former CFL football player. So we can settle the age-old debate. What is the better background for MMA? Is it lower level pro football or Division II basketball? So we'll finally get to settle that one this weekend, which will be good.
Julius Walker also coming down from heavyweight, I believe, right? He passed a couple fights at light heavyweight. I think he competed at heavyweight earlier in his career. He's a big dude, and he's got room to add onto this frame. He's only been training MMA for a few years. He's 25 years old. He was playing college basketball till he was 22. So this is the type of guy whose skill set should level up relatively quickly relative to other people his age. You know, he's barely been training. You're going to see huge leaps from him from one fight to the next. His last fight, I want to pull it up. It was
The last one
in
was booked at heavyweight that he was supposed to have, and then he came this one. So I'm guessing he was going to show up at like 225 or whatever. So not a
yeah,
true heavyweight, but
yeah, he's a big guy. So we'll see. The biggest concern, like I'm assuming he'll have the cardio advantage because he's the younger man. But as you pointed out, he's basically finished every fight in the first round and a half. Metafield tends to slow down after round one. Walker may too, especially if he was previously, maybe taking a fight up at heavyweight, now cutting back to 205. So I do worry about the cardio dynamic here and Walker not having the ability to sustain later in the fight. But the age advantage is the thing I'm leaning on here. 12 years younger. As I pointed out earlier, when there's at least a decade of UFC or decade of age between UFC combatants, the younger fighter wins about 12% more often than the betting market expects. They just tend to be underrated. The older fighters have more of a fan base, more familiarity, more tape on them. People are just likelier to bet things that they're more familiar with against the unknown. I think the unknown worth leaning into here at plus money. 2-1 plus 210 on Walker is what I took last night. Let's move on to our top props. I've got a fun one here. I'm going to go Gene Silva by submission at plus 750. I also bet him inside the distance at about minus 135 at ESPN. ESPN lets you place fighters to win inside the distance, but you have to do it as a same game parlay. You have to hit the fighter money line and then the ends inside the distance. No. Oftentimes at that book, betting those SGPs, you actually get a better price than you do on their inside the distance odds elsewhere. DraftKings, FanDuel, BetMGM. So always take a look and see what other options books let you put together in terms of the same game parlay market. That is how you bet inside the distance at that particular book. And I got a number that is about 18 cents better than as it'll get anywhere else. But I do like Silva to win this by submission at plus 750. I think he has a big grappling advantage here over Melsik Bagdasaryan. Fighting Nerds trained. We often see the Fighting Nerds guys pursue the path of least resistance against their opponents. They do tend to have pretty good fight IQ. That said, Silva is, I don't know the best way to put this. There's a few guys on that team who don't seem like they're mentally all there, and they just want to throw down inside the cage. And Gene Silva is somebody I would put in that category. Mauricio Hufi probably in that category as well. So even though he has the grappling advantage, even though I think he can finish this fight via submission, there's a very strong chance that Gene Silva just decides to strike it out for 15 minutes and probably doesn't cover his minus 500, etc. price tag. So as a result, I think Melsik, the money line side or pass, I think Melsik a good chance of winning round one on the feet. He's got a really nasty body kick. Gene maintains a really tight high guard. So he's going to leave himself open to those body kicks. Probably not going to get knocked out with a head strike. But if this fight does hit the ground, I think Gene Silva can wrap up a guillotine and finish this one pretty quickly. I also like him live after round one. If he is striking it out, if Melsik does win that first round, if you can get minus 200 on Gene Silva live after round one before he's even attempted to grapple, I think that might be a solid spot to bet into as well. Billy, any thoughts on the Silva versus Melsik fight, and then any other top props you want to give out aside from the Walker inside the distance play?
I absolutely love the Gene Silva submission. It makes all the sense in the world. Melsik's only loss in the UFC was a submission. He's been either taken down or submitted in 4 or 5 promotional appearances. He's a former kickboxer. Like, everything is pointing that way. I get what you mean on the mindset, but like, worst case scenario with that, you can still hope for a club and sub. Maybe Gene Silva hurts him and he turns his back when he falls down and we get a cheeky submission, even though he won with his striking. So that one makes a ton of sense. I, like you, was a little bit worried about his money line in case it turns into a kickboxing match. So that submission prop is, I think, the perfect way to handle this one.
Yeah, even, the durability thing for Melsik, like the inside the distance part on Silva, I project value on the under or ends inside the distance here. I wanted to have something tied to this fight finishing by KO or Silva winning via KO. I didn't want to lay the minus 180, though, on the fight to end an ICD, or maybe even a little bit steeper than that. So getting that off-market price, I guess I would call it, on Silva inside the distance, I think worth betting. Minus 155, north of minus 150, Silva inside the distance, not really as interested. Silva submission, the best way to play this fight. You could also make it a small sprinkle if he never decides to grapple. You won't be particularly mad about it because he didn't risk a ton on the loss. Let's move on to our best bets for this card. As I said, you're going to take another shot on another underdog, but you're going to do so on the point spread. Ricky Simone plus 3.5 points at minus 140 in a 3-round fight. Just need him to win 1 round on each scorecards. Tell me why you like him.
Yeah, I was really hoping we get a better price on this because his money line is as high as plus 210 at ESPN. Even so, this one's really hard to pass up. Very good grappler, just attempts a ton of takedowns. Javid Bashrat usually will grapple with you. Like, even if he's not initiating that, he'll usually jump into it. And if you look at Ricky Simone's last 3 fights, he got knocked out in the 5th round by Song Yadong, but had won some rounds before that. And at least one judge gave him a round in both of his last 2 losses against people who are probably tougher to grapple than Javid Bashrat. Bashrat doesn't finish anyone, just kind of out there, point fighting, mixing in some takedowns. The odds of him stealing a round here in a fight that's very likely to go to decision is pretty high. So what I did, I put 0.7 units to win half a unit on Ricky Simone minus 140 on the point spread, and then 0.3 units on his money line. That way, even if he covers the point spread, slight profit, big profit if he wins outright. I think he's undervalued just as a money line play here for the stylistic matchup, but I would prefer the point spread. I'd really prefer the point spread at plus money or whatever, but we're not getting that this time around.
Yeah, I show value on the fight to go to a decision. Now it is minus 350. I think you can use it as a parlay piece. I also like Simone by decision at 3-1. That might be a round robin piece for me. A couple of other fights that I view very similarly on this card that when I modeled them out seem to have a lot of public action pointing to the underdog. And as a result, I'm not on the underdog. The Andre Fili Melky Costa fight, and then also the Rob Font John Matsumoto fight. I like both of those fights to go to a decision. I lean to both underdogs as value to win by decision. I don't necessarily know if I like any of these 3 underdogs to ultimately win the decision, but those are the value plays for me. Simone by decision, Fili by decision, Font by decision, all 3 of those fights to go to a decision. The Fili fight, the Font fight, Billy, before we get out of here, before I give out my best bets, any takes on those fights? Because I think the underdogs are going to be very popular in both of those matchups, and I think ultimately both may end up looking like value traps.
Yeah, I actually had in my notes, like before the market came up, that I was really interested in Rob Font plus 3.5 for almost exact same reasons as talked about with Ricky Simone. But the price adjustment is insane. He's minus 195 and plus 3.5, which I just can't take. Like, that's too far for a point spread bet. And what was it? Oh, Andre Fili. Yeah, this one's moved around a lot. I took Andre Fili early in the week, hoping the line would move enough that I could arb it out on the other side, but now I'm kind of left holding my Andre Fili bag. I'm fine with that. I think he probably should win. Melky Costa has looked really good when they give him bad opponents, but doesn't seem like mid-UFC level. He seems like he's kind of holding the door between low and mid-level, where we know Andre Fili at this point. He's dangerous. He can beat anyone. So I like the Fili side a little bit. I wish I had been able to time the market movement a little bit better. And yeah, I'm with you. If I like the point spread, I guess it makes sense that also that guy by decision logically is a solid bet if you want something riskier.
6-year age gap between Font, or between Fili and Melky Costa, I believe. And then, 6-year age gap, but much more significant. 12 years between Font and Matsumoto. So just worth noting that the age angles I discussed earlier, with everybody seemingly in the public projections that I'm, accumulating data from, seeming to be on Font and Fili. I'm passing on both of those fights. Lean to either fighter, either underdog to win by decision, probably saving both for round robin tickets, if at all. A couple bets I want to give out before we get out of here. Technically best bets, I would file these under best of the rest or as equivalent to anything else I've given out on this card, but probably, the top 2 bets if I had to choose them amongst what I'm betting this weekend. My 2 favorite bets. Austin Vanderford currently can get him about minus 110. I took minus 103. He opened at plus money. This was a very late booking to the point where props aren't even up yet for this fight. But his opponent was actually moved off of a booking from last week back to this week. He pulled out of that fight, moved back to this week, Nikolai Veretnikov. And Veretnikov is really bad. Once you put him on bottom, Vanderford is a decent wrestler. He's NAIA national champion. I don't like his striking defense. I think Nikolai can absolutely hurt him, finish him on the feet. But once Vanderford starts landing takedowns, I think he's going to take over the momentum of this fight. Should be able to press him up against the cage. Should be able to control from top position. And then Vanderford live after round 1. The longer this fight goes, the better I think it plays out for him. Also coming down from middleweight to welterweight for this fight, essentially. Spent most of his career at middleweight, had some good wins over in Bellator that have aged particularly well. I do think he's a pretty good wrestler, and I think getting essentially what was, the grappling upside, all the grappling upside at plus money, now getting it at a pick-em price. I think Vanderford clear side. I would bet him up to about minus 120, project him closer to minus 130. And then Ion Cutelaba at plus 152 against Ibo Aslan. I mentioned that Aslan KO1 against Zerrillo earlier. I think that's provided value both against Aslan and on Zerrillo. Those KOs are just not repeatable, and eventually you are going to run into guys as you move up the ladder of the UFC rankings who can take those punches. And Ibo Aslan, once he goes against the guy who can take those punches, his game is going to fall apart in the second and third round. He can't grapple. He doesn't have good cardio. He has good power. He's the bigger man, 2 inch taller, 2 inch reach advantage. But if Cutelaba survives that first round, I think he takes over with the grappling. I think he actually has the better cardio of the two, which is very rare for an Ion Cutelaba fight. He faded in the third round of his last fight. It's actually the first time we've seen him fight more measured, more conservatively, ended up winning a decision. Really like to see the development and the improvement in his skill set and his mindset in terms of approaching these fights. And it's a fight where he may have a rare cardio advantage over his opponent. So Ion Cutelaba want plus 145 or better. May consider him live after round one as well, once I can see how both guys look near the end of the round, how they look on the stools. But Billy, any thoughts on Cutelaba at plus 152? I know you liked Vanderford. Not sure what price target you like him up to.
Yeah, I'm with you on Vanderford. Vretnikov got taken down 4 times by Michael Morales on the Contender Series, and Michael Morales is like a pure striker. He strikes with everybody else. So that tells you both, how much he motivates opponents to want to take him down, but also how relatively easy it is. I actually took the Ibo Aslan side. I got him at minus 150 earlier in the week. Would absolutely not take minus 180 or minus 190 on that now. If it moves even more, I might just arb out and take a little profit either way. To me, it feels like a pretty pure striker versus grappler match. Not that Iwan can't strike, but he's at such a power disadvantage, and his chin seems to be rapidly leaving him, even though he's only 31. So those two things make it hard. And then, Ibo has defended every takedown he's faced in the UFC so far, but like they all came from Anton Turkalj. So it's more of a question mark, I'd say, than a weakness. Might be a weakness we might see this time, but yeah, fairly binary fight. I love that one for DFS. Either Ion gets takedowns and finishes it pretty fast, or he gets knocked out right away. But yeah, at the price it's at now, I'm with you. I think that's the better side, and maybe we'll see if I can get both sides and just lock in a profit either way.
A lot of fights heavily juiced to go to a decision, or at least that I expect to go to a decision on this card. That's a great shout out on the Cutelaba Aslan fight for DFS purposes. I would assume the Walker Menafield fight would probably be good for you for DFS purposes. Any other ones you're going to be targeting for DFS this weekend?
Alan Hernandez seems like another good one, because if I think it's either Alan early or Anthony Hernandez doing a Merab impression, kind of either way, the winner gets a big score there. Main event's kind of fun too. Honestly, similar logic in the main event, because Song quick knockout or a lot of damage, or Henry Cejudo just lands 26 takedowns that he holds for 4 seconds each. Either way, we're good with that. So yeah, those are kind of like the 4 where I want exposure to. Kind of a tough week when we're down to 12 fights. There's a lot hard to make unique lineups, so you got to get a little bit off the board. I would even consider stacking the main event, because there's a case that Cejudo gets takedowns for 3 or 4 rounds and gets knocked out late. Both guys end up with a good score, even in a loss. So it's kind of where I'm at right now.
No, great points. I considering I had those 3 fights all over like minus 300, projected to reach a decision.
Yeah.
Again, the Font Matsumoto, Simone Basharat, and Fili Costa. I'm probably not going to pick any of those 6 fighters in DFS lineups. Maybe one of them. Like skipping 3 of those fights. Now I'm down to 9, so let's find fights to focus on. So yeah, I appreciate you going a little bit more into the DFS angles for this weekend, but that'll do it for our UFC betting preview. You can find more UFC betting content for both Billy and myself on actionnetwork.com and in the Action Network app. And remember, if you want to instantly tail some of the bets we discussed on today's show, look for the quick slip link in the podcast and the video descriptions, or visit actionnetwork.com/bet now. Don't forget to download the free award-winning Action Network app and sign up for Action Pro for immediate access to expert picks, analysis, and quicker bet notifications. Best of luck with all your bets this weekend. Enjoy the violence. Thank you for listening. See you next time.